Most people believe toxic people remain in their lives because of bad luck. That isn't true. They stay because something in you keeps the door open. You explain yourself. You react emotionally. You try to be understood. And without noticing, you reinforce the very behavior that drains you. Here is the hard Stoic truth. Toxic people don't need your approval. They need your attention. The moment you stop supplying it, the entire dynamic collapses. Not through confrontation, not through arguments, not by cutting people off in anger, but through one quiet, disciplined action. The Stoics understood this centuries ago. They knew power never comes from controlling others. It comes from controlling access to yourself. Today you'll learn what to do once, not repeatedly, not emotionally, and why this single shift causes toxic people to fade from your life on their own. This isn't about comfort. This is about reclaiming your authority. 1. Why toxic people are drawn to you. This is difficult to accept, but toxic people are rarely attracted to weakness. They are drawn to access. They notice who responds quickly, who explains themselves when challenged, who feels uneasy being misunderstood. When they find that person, they stay. Not because you are naive, not because you lack intelligence or strength, but because your inner world is still open to negotiation. Toxic people don't seek connection the way healthy people do. They seek engagement, emotional engagement, mental engagement, the subtle back and forth where your attention becomes leverage. Every reaction reinforces something. Every defense leaves a door unlocked. Every urge to clarify, correct, or fix the dynamic tightens the bond from the outside. From the inside, it looks like conflict. In reality, it's dependency. Stoicism helps you see this without blame. You are not responsible for another person's toxicity, but you are responsible for how much access they have to you. Most people misunderstand this and turn inward with shame. They ask, "What's wrong with me?" But the better question is more precise. What am I consistently allowing? Toxic people test boundaries the way water tests cracks. They don't push where resistance is firm. They apply pressure where there is movement. If you explain yourself, they push again. If you react emotionally, they return. If you try to keep peace by absorbing discomfort, they settle in. None of this happens because you are weak. It happens because you are predictable. Predictable reactions, predictable availability, predictable emotional openness. Stoicism teaches that predictability is power when chosen and vulnerability when exploited. This is why toxic people often attach to kind, thoughtful, emotionally aware individuals. Not because those traits invite harm, but because manipulators rely on responsiveness. You care, you reflect, you try to understand. In healthy dynamics, this builds trust. In toxic ones, it becomes a resource to extract. Marcus Aurelius warned that we suffer more from our judgments than from events themselves. In modern terms, the pain isn't caused by the toxic person alone, but by your continued participation in the emotional exchange. Toxic people are not powerful figures standing over you. They are dependent figures pulling at you, dependent on your reactions, your explanations, your emotional movement. That's why calm unsettles them. Silence frustrates them. Detachment feels threatening. When you stop reacting, the system they rely on begins to starve. Here is the most important realization. This attraction is not personal. You are not being targeted because you are broken. You are being engaged because your energy is still reachable. Stoicism doesn't ask you to close your heart. It asks you to guard your access. Once you see this clearly, something shifts. You stop internalizing the behavior of others. You stop blaming yourself for dynamics you never created. Toxic people don't attach to who you are. They attach to what they can reach. And when that reach ends, their interest fades, not through conflict, but through inevitability. 2. The one thing you must do once. If you expect a dramatic move, you may be surprised. Stoic power is rarely loud. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't warn. The one thing you must do is this: withdraw emotional access. Not gradually, not temporarily, not with speeches or explanations. Once. Most people misunderstand what this means. They think it requires confrontation, cutting people off, or becoming cold. It doesn't. Those are still reactions, and reactions are what toxic people feed on. Withdrawing emotional access means you stop offering your inner world as shared space. You stop explaining your tone. You stop justifying your boundaries. You stop defending your intentions. You stop reacting from the place they are trying to reach. This is not avoidance. This is sovereignty. The Stoics believed your emotions, attention, and energy are your only true possessions. Everything else can be taken. These cannot, unless you hand them over. Toxic people operate on one assumption: that they are entitled to your emotional response. The moment that assumption collapses, so does their influence. Notice how different this is from cutting someone off. Cutting off is emotional. It often carries anger, resentment, or the need to prove a point. Toxic people still feel powerful then. They know they mattered enough to provoke a reaction. Withdrawing access is quiet. There is no announcement, no final message, no closure speech. Your behavior simply changes. Your replies become neutral or absent. Your tone becomes calm and brief. Your energy no longer rises to meet theirs. You don't punish, you don't lecture, you don't try to teach a lesson. You simply stop supplying what they came for. From a Stoic perspective, this is the highest form of boundary, not a line drawn in words, but a limit enforced by action. Epictetus taught that if you want to be invincible, you must never stake your peace on what you don't control. You can't control how others behave, but you can control how much access they have to you. That's why you only need to do this once. The first time you withdraw emotional access completely, the dynamic resets. The rules change. And unlike arguments or explanations, this shift doesn't invite negotiation. Some people adjust. They sense the boundary and respect it. Others escalate. They provoke, guilt, or play the victim. That isn't failure. It's confirmation. They're reaching for a lever that no longer works. When it doesn't work, something inevitable happens. They disengage, not because you push them away, but because there is nothing left to pull. This is the Stoic paradox. When you stop trying to control the relationship, you regain control of yourself. And once that happens, toxic people lose interest. Not slowly, not dramatically, naturally, because access was the only thing keeping them there. 3. Why explaining yourself keeps them alive. There is a habit most people never question, even when it exhausts them: the habit of explaining. You explain your tone to avoid being misunderstood. You explain your boundaries so you don't seem harsh. You explain your intentions so no one thinks badly of you. In healthy relationships, this can bring clarity. With toxic people, it does the opposite. It keeps the dynamic alive. Every explanation places you back in the arena. It signals that their judgment still matters, that their approval is relevant, that your inner world is open for negotiation. This is exactly what toxic people wait for. They don't listen to understand. They listen to respond, twist, or extract emotion. From a Stoic point of view, this is where power quietly leaks. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that other people's opinions do not define his character. Yet repeated self-explanation acts as if they do. You invite others into a role they never earned. Explanation becomes a form of self-abandonment. You may believe you're being reasonable, mature, or peaceful, but what's happening is simpler. You trade peace for temporary relief. Each explanation calms the situation briefly, then creates the need for another. A pattern forms. Pressure leads to access. Once learned, it repeats. Toxic people are not confused by your silence. They are disturbed by it. Silence removes their ability to argue with your version of events. It removes their ability to redirect the conversation. It removes their ability to control the emotional temperature. That's why provocation increases when explanations stop, not because they are hurt, but because they are losing influence. Stoicism teaches that dignity is not defended, it is embodied. The moment you feel the urge to justify who you are, you have already stepped out of that dignity. This doesn't mean becoming cruel or dismissive. It means you stop performing clarity for those who misuse it. A boundary that requires explanation is not a boundary. It is a request, and requests can be ignored. Toxic people survive on the hope that if they apply pressure long enough, you'll crack, that you'll send the paragraph, that you'll make the call, that you'll try one more time to make them understand your side. But here is the Stoic insight most people miss. You don't owe clarity to someone committed to misunderstanding you. The energy you spend explaining could have been spent living. The peace you give away trying to be understood could have been kept. When you stop explaining, something powerful happens. The conversation ends exactly where it should have ended long ago. Not with conflict, not with closure, but with disengagement. Toxic people don't disappear because you win an argument. They disappear because there is no longer a conversation to dominate. And in the quiet space where explanation once existed, your authority returns. Not loudly, not dramatically, fully. This is the silent boundary that ends the game. Most people believe boundaries are something you announce. They imagine a serious conversation, clear words, a firm tone, a moment where everything is finally said. But that kind of boundary is still a negotiation. Stoicism teaches something far more effective. The strongest boundary is not spoken, it is lived. A silent boundary is not passive, it is precise. It shows up in what you no longer respond to, in how quickly or slowly you reply, in the emotional temperature you refuse to match. Toxic people are skilled at crossing verbal boundaries. They argue with them, they reinterpret them, they test how serious you really are. But behavior is harder to argue with. When your energy changes consistently, the message becomes unmistakable. You stop reacting to provocation. You stop engaging with disrespect disguised as humor. You stop rewarding guilt, drama, or manipulation with emotional movement. There is no announcement, no explanation, no warning. The boundary exists because your behavior enforces it. This is what ends the game. Toxic dynamics rely on escalation. One reaction leads to another. One message invites a longer one. One emotional response opens the door to more pressure. A silent boundary cuts that chain, not by force, but by removing friction. Epictetus taught that if you wish to be respected, you must first respect your own inner order. That order breaks every time you allow yourself to be pulled into chaos you did not choose. Silence in this sense is not absence, it is structure. It tells others exactly where you stand without giving them something to push against. This is why silence frustrates toxic people more than confrontation ever could. There is nothing to argue with, nothing to twist, nothing to escalate. They are left alone with their own behavior, and that is something they cannot tolerate for long. A silent boundary also protects you from something subtle but dangerous: the need to be right. When you argue, part of you wants recognition, validation, victory. But Stoicism is not about winning exchanges. It is about preserving peace. You don't need to prove someone wrong to step away from them. You only need to decide what you no longer participate in. This is the difference between reacting and choosing. Reacting keeps you entangled. Choosing frees you. Over time, the effects compound. Your nervous system settles. Your thoughts slow down. You stop replaying conversations in your head, and toxic people feel it. They sense that the old buttons no longer work, that emotional leverage is gone, that access has been replaced with distance. Some will attempt one final push, a last test, but when nothing changes, when your calm remains untouched, the message becomes undeniable. The game is over, not because you announced it, but because you stopped playing. That is the quiet power of the Stoic boundary, and once it is in place, there is nothing left to explain. 5. What happens after you do this? When you withdraw emotional access, most people expect immediate peace, silence, relief, resolution. But the first thing that usually appears is resistance. This is where many panic and assume they've done something wrong. They haven't. From a Stoic perspective, this phase is not a setback. It's confirmation that the boundary is working. Toxic dynamics rarely end quietly at first. They end with testing. When someone realizes they can no longer reach you in the old way, their behavior often intensifies. Messages grow dramatic, tone shifts, accusations appear. Sometimes guilt replaces anger. This isn't growth, it's withdrawal. You removed the emotional supply and the system is reacting. The mistake many people make is responding during this phase. They feel the urge to clarify, to defend, to explain that they aren't being cold, selfish, or unfair. But this is exactly the moment Stoicism asks you to remain still. Marcus Aurelius wrote that you should stand like the cliff against which the waves continually crash, yet it remains unmoved. The waves don't stop because the cliff argues with them. They stop because there is nothing to move. What you're witnessing now is the final attempt to restore the old dynamic. Some will accuse you of changing, others will play the victim. They will speak of how hurt they are, how confused they feel, how unfair your silence seems. This is not a request for understanding. It is an attempt to reopen access. Stoicism does not ask you to become heartless. It asks you to become clear. Compassion does not require self-betrayal. As time passes, something predictable happens. The intensity fades. Without emotional engagement, the interaction loses momentum. Messages slow, provocations soften. Eventually contact diminishes or stops altogether, not because you forced it, but because there is no reward left. This is the moment many people finally understand a painful truth. Some relationships existed only because you were willing to suffer inside them. When that suffering ends, so does the relationship. This realization can bring mixed emotions, relief, sadness, even grief. That doesn't mean you chose wrong. It means you're seeing clearly. The Stoics never promised comfort. They promised freedom. Freedom from emotional manipulation. Freedom from constant tension. Freedom from battles you never chose. What replaces the chaos is not excitement, it is calm. A calm that feels unfamiliar at first, a quiet that reveals how much noise you are carrying. And in that quiet, something important happens. Your standards rise. You become less available to disrespect, less tolerant of drama, less interested in explaining yourself. People who value depth and mutual respect remain. Those who needed your reactions disappear, not explosively, not dramatically, but naturally. Once access is gone, there is nothing left to take. 6. Why you only need to do this once. Most people assume boundaries require constant reinforcement, that you must keep explaining them, defending them, repeating them. Stoicism teaches the opposite. A true boundary is not something you remind others of. It is something you embody. Once you withdraw emotional access completely and consistently, the relationship enters a new reality. The old rules no longer apply, and unlike arguments or confrontations, this shift does not invite debate. This is why you only need to do it once. When people realize your reactions are no longer available, they either adjust or they leave. There is no middle ground, because what they were engaging with no longer exists. Think about habits. If touching a hot surface burns you every time, you don't need reminders. You stop touching it. Human behavior works the same way. When emotional pressure no longer produces access, the behavior fades. Many people fail here because they hesitate. They withdraw access for a while, then re-engage out of guilt, loneliness, or hope. That single moment of renewed access resets the entire pattern. Stoicism is precise about this. Consistency is not cruelty. Inconsistency is. Every time you make an exception for behavior that drains you, you teach others how to treat you all over again. This is why Stoic boundaries are calm and final. Not announced, not dramatic, not reactive, just steady. Epictetus warned that if you wish to be free, you must never allow your peace to depend on the actions of others. Repeating boundaries means you are still waiting for someone else to change. Embodying a boundary means you already have. The power of doing this once lies in its clarity. There is no confusion about where you stand, no opening for negotiation, no ambiguity to exploit. People who respect you feel it immediately. They don't push. They don't test. They sense the internal order and adjust their behavior accordingly. Those who relied on your emotional availability feel something else, a sudden lack of traction. Their words land nowhere. Their pressure dissolves. That discomfort is not your responsibility. You are not required to make your boundaries comfortable for others. You are required to make them effective. This is where many people discover something unexpected. They don't actually lose as many people as they feared. They lose patterns. They lose dynamics. They lose exhaustion. What remains is space. Space to think clearly. Space to respond instead of react. Space to choose who earns access to you. And once that space exists, you don't need to guard it aggressively. It protects itself. This is the Stoic paradox again. When you stop managing relationships emotionally, they begin to manage themselves. You don't need to repeat the action because the system has already learned. Access is no longer guaranteed. From that point on, life becomes quieter, not empty but intentional. Peace, once claimed, does not need to be defended. It only needs to be maintained by who you choose to be. 7. The identity shift. When toxic people leave your life, the change isn't only external. Something deeper happens within you. At first it feels like relief, the absence of tension, the silence where arguments once lived. Slowly, that relief becomes awareness. You begin to see how much of your identity was shaped by reacting, by explaining, by managing other people's emotions. Stoicism reveals a difficult truth here. As long as your sense of self depends on how others respond to you, you are not free. Withdrawing emotional access is not just a tactic. It is an identity shift. You stop being someone who needs to be understood by everyone. You stop feeling responsible for fixing every dynamic. You stop measuring your worth through emotional labor. Instead, you become someone who chooses where energy goes. This shift is subtle but powerful. Your voice changes, not louder, calmer. Your presence changes, not more intense, more grounded. Your decisions change, not impulsive, deliberate. You no longer feel the urge to correct every misunderstanding. You no longer rush to defend yourself. You don't panic when someone misreads you. You begin to understand something the Stoics lived by. Your character is proven through action, not explanation. Marcus Aurelius wrote that you should waste no time arguing about what a good person should be. Be one. At this stage, that advice becomes real. You stop narrating who you are, you start living it. As this identity settles, people respond differently to you, not because you demand respect, but because your self-respect is visible. Those who thrive on chaos feel uneasy. Those who value clarity feel safe. You attract fewer intense connections and more stable ones, fewer emotional negotiations and more mutual understanding. Most importantly, you become less reactive to life itself. Setbacks no longer spiral you. Criticism doesn't consume you. Silence doesn't frighten you because you are no longer anchored to constant feedback. This is what the Stoics meant by the inner citadel, a place within you that remains steady regardless of external noise. The identity shift is complete when you realize this. Peace is not something you protect from others. It is something you generate through discipline. At this point, toxic people don't just disappear from your life, they disappear from your focus. You stop replaying conversations. You stop fantasizing about closure. You stop wondering if you did the right thing. You know you did, because the measure of growth is not who stays, it's who no longer has access. And once your identity is rooted in that clarity, you don't fear being alone, misunderstood, or misjudged. You fear only one thing: returning to a life where your peace was optional. That is the final Stoic transformation, not becoming harder, but becoming whole. Toxic people don't disappear because you finally say the right words. They disappear when you stop giving them something to feed on. Throughout this journey, the truth has been simple, though not easy. You were never trapped because you were weak. You were trapped because your energy was accessible. Stoicism never asks you to harden your heart or close yourself off from the world. It asks you to become selective, to understand that your attention, your emotions, and your inner calm are not public property. When you withdraw emotional access, you don't punish anyone. You realign yourself. You stop negotiating your peace. You stop explaining your worth. You stop participating in dynamics that quietly drain your life. And the moment you do that, something inevitable happens. People who relied on reaction lose interest. People who relied on manipulation lose leverage. People who respected you all along remain. This is why the change feels permanent, not because you forced it, but because it came from identity, not impulse. Stoic wisdom teaches that freedom is not found in controlling others. It is found in mastering yourself. When you choose calm over reaction, silence over justification, discipline over emotional chaos, you become unreachable to what once controlled you. That is the quiet victory. You don't need to win arguments. You don't need to explain your boundaries. You don't need to make people understand you. You only need to decide what no longer has access. Do this once. Live it consistently. And toxic people won't disappear because you chased them away. They'll disappear because you finally chose yourself.